First and foremost, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me in this video. I have discovered something truly incredible, and I want to share it with every member of the church. In this video, we're going to be discussing a principle with the promise, and that would be the word of wisdom. We'll be answering questions, just a couple questions in this video I really want you to think about. First of all, what is the principle and what is the promise? So keep that in the back of your brain. Part of what I'm trying to get at here is exactly what Gordon B. Hinckley teaches us in this quote that he gave, which reads, "Look upon the word of wisdom as more than a commonplace thing. I regard it as the most remarkable document on health of which I know. It came to the prophet Joseph Smith in 1833, when relatively little was known of dietary matters. Now, the greater the scientific research, the more certain becomes the proof of word of wisdom principles." Every member of the church has to answer specific questions that deem them worthy to enter the temple. Every single one, from the little 11-year-olds all the way up to the prophet. Of those questions, there is one question you are supposed to answer that I really want you to think about today, and it's this. Do you understand and obey the word of wisdom? Most of us can easily say, yes, we understand the word of wisdom. We don't drink alcohol or tea or coffee, and we don't smoke. And that's all that has really been defined, honestly, that we need in order to enter the temple at this point in time. But I'm going to ask this question a little bit differently. Do you really understand and obey the word of wisdom? Do you really understand and obey the word of wisdom? I often wonder how many people really understand the word of wisdom. It's true that we, as members of the church, are healthier than most people because we abstain from these things, but we are still not that healthy. I want you to think, how many of you, or those you know who claim to follow the word of wisdom, suffer from heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, stroke, dementia, overweight, obesity, metabolic syndrome? There's a lot that I didn't put on here, or a combination of any of those diseases. I love this quote by President Nelson. He says, "In our day, the faithful keep the word of wisdom. It is a sign unto God that we are his people." So back to this simple list of diseases. How many of these do you or someone you know who is a stalwart member of the church suffer from? How many of you are aware that these types of diseases are 100% preventable and in almost all cases reversible as well? These are often called chronic diseases in the medical world, but in reality, they are lifestyle diseases. This is what the latest research has shown us. These are diseases that we suffer from based on poor lifestyle choices. President Ezra Taft Benson seemed very aware of this when he said, "To a significant degree, we are an overfed and undernourished nation, digging an early grave with our teeth and lacking the energy that could be ours. We need a generation who, as Daniel, eat in a more healthy manner than to fare on the king's meat, and whose countenances show it." I'm not sure if you have heard of the blue zones, but let me talk about that really quickly. The blue zones are 5 cities in the world in which the most people who live to the age of 100 come from. These people were studied, and these cities were studied to find out exactly what it is that caused them to live so long and be so healthy. As I remember studying these zones for the first time, I was really fascinated by their lifestyle choices. And I remember thinking very, very clearly, why is Utah, or even specifically St. George with its high population of elderly people, not a blue zone? There is only one city in America that fit the bill for healthy old people that live to 100, and that is Loma Linda, California. The population there is predominantly Seventh-day Adventists. Now, we do live longer as members of the church than most Americans, and we do have less disease, but we still get quite a bit of disease. So, what is it that makes the Seventh-day Adventists so different if they have a similar health code? In regard to the blue zones, it was said that Southern Utah missed out on a blue zone nomination because it's not in the same league as the other 5. Mormon Utah simply can't compete. Seventh-day Adventists completely blow us out of the water in terms of health. That kind of blew my mind. If we are to be the Lord's people and follow his word of wisdom, his blueprint for how to take care of our bodies, then why are we still not considered the healthiest people? Keep your mind open on this thought for just a minute. First of all, I feel like I should introduce myself to you. My name is Cindy. I'm a former exercise specialist who worked with people who had chronic disease. And I'm also a health and well-being coach and certified lifestyle medicine coach. I specialize in type 2 diabetes reversal. And lifestyle medicine is a very new, up-and-coming, science-based branch of medicine that, rather than focusing on lowering the symptoms of disease through medication and management in that regard, it actually gets to the root cause of disease in order to prevent, treat, and reverse disease. Let me tell you why this also matters so much to me. When I became a mother, I became a mom to twins, and not just twins, but twins with serious, serious health problems. I would have given anything to help them overcome their issues that they had at the time, and they eventually did, which was honestly kind of a miracle. So when my third baby was born, I was completely overcome with fear that she would end up like my twins, that some health problem, she would have some health problem that I couldn't do anything about like them. And I prayed to God to know how to prevent that from happening to her. It just consumed me because I had been through so much trauma with my twins. Now, I grew up in the church, but the word of wisdom was always just kind of a side note to me. It was nothing serious, and I don't blame anyone for not taking it seriously. It's one section, one chapter with 21 verses. And so it's not really something that people noticed very much. I didn't think anything seriously of it, but as I dealt with this fear, I prayed to the Lord and was led to the word of wisdom in quite an amazing way. Since then, I've been studying the word of wisdom for about 7 years, along with the research that backs it up. And during that time, I discovered lifestyle medicine. Like I said, this branch of medicine, lifestyle medicine, completely backed up the word of wisdom in every regard. In recent years, I felt a very strong pull to teach people the word of wisdom so that they can truly live and learn the science behind it and heal their bodies. And I've had many clients of mine do just that and get off of their medications for good by following lifestyle medicine and better following the word of wisdom. I just want to give you an example of this really quickly. My client, we'll call him Charles, he came to me because he was so sick of a life of medication. He told me that when you retire, your work basically just becomes going to doctors all the time. That's how he felt. So Charles had been a diabetic for over 20 years. He couldn't even remember how long. He was just so tired of the way that his metformin made him feel. And he told his doctor he wasn't going to take it. Metformin being the most prescribed medication for type 2 diabetes. So when he told his doctor that he was done, she quickly put him on insulin, which he also didn't really like. He was just so tired of taking medication. Screen is crooked. I just realized that. Like my head's like sideways. Anyway, sorry guys. So he also didn't like insulin because you have to poke yourself, and he was just so tired of taking medication in every regard. So that's when Charles sought me out, and we worked together for 14 weeks. And in that time, he lowered his A1C, which is for type 2 diabetes, from 8 to 6.5 in 14 weeks. During that time, he also lost 30 pounds. His fasting blood glucose became normal in just a matter of weeks, even while tapering his medication dose. So when we started, he was taking 6 medications for multiple issues, including high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and heart medication. And at the end of those 14 weeks together, he was down to just 1, which was a preventative medication. And his dose for that was also drastically lowered. Charles was ecstatic about the changes that his body was making. He had his health back, but he reversed not only his diabetes, but his blood pressure and his high cholesterol. He improved his kidney function and his heart function as well. And I recently talked to him about how he was doing, and things are still going great. He's continuously losing weight doing what I've taught him, and he's just really blown away by how his body literally healed itself. He came to me to reverse his diabetes, but he never imagined that it would completely change his health. This to me is what the word of wisdom calls temporal salvation in verse 2. Charles is very active now. He still eats the way I taught him to, because it makes him feel so good, and it helps him to easily lose weight. So like I said, he's still eating this way. He's very excited. He's lost over 60 pounds in 7 months, and it continues to fall very easily. The word of wisdom is the will and order of God in temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. That's what D&C 89:2 reads. Some personal questions here for you to just quickly think about. What do you personally feel like temporal salvation looks like? What does it feel like? In your current state, do you feel like you are experiencing temporal salvation? I want you to really think about that, and what would that mean for you? According to the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, 80% of all these diseases can be prevented, treated, or reversed through simple lifestyle changes. 80%. And those lifestyle changes are, for the most part, found in D&C 89, which is the section on the word of wisdom. So if we aren't feeling like we're in a state of temporal salvation and we are suffering from disease, then what do we need to do to change things? How can we feel better and feel healthier? First of all, put your focus on the do's of the word of wisdom more than the don'ts. Most of us have the don'ts down. They aren't really an issue or a temptation for most of us. I've honestly never been tempted to drink alcohol, but like I said, for most of us. But there is so much more to the word of wisdom than just tea, coffee, and tobacco and alcohol. In fact, that's actually a very small portion of the word of wisdom, just a few verses. So we need to put more focus on the rest of the section. Because if we are suffering from disease that can be prevented, we're clearly missing something, right? Why should all of this matter so much to us? Why should it matter to you? Why should temporal salvation matter to you? I have a few reasons here that prophets have taught us, that um, you know, that we get from the scriptures, just a few. So, um, if what we're putting into our bodies or our temples is important enough to be a question that we are asked to be worthy to enter the temple, then we should really understand what is in the word of wisdom and not just assume. God wants us to have healthy bodies. This allows us to serve and do his work here on the earth. How many people are turned away from serving missions or serving as temple workers or even ward callings because their health isn't good enough? It's unfortunate that it has come to something like this when the answer to healing is literally found in less than 21 scriptures. Our body is a gift from God. Are we treating it the way he asked us to? Are we taking care of it to the best of our abilities? Are we showing him our gratitude for it by how we treat it and what we are putting into it? I think those are questions that we don't really ever consider. Our temporal state is connected to our spiritual state. This is mentioned multiple times in the temple. This has been mentioned multiple times by leaders of the church. If you pay attention, really, like, it is all connected. And if we are not treating our temporal body the best that we can, then we are not getting the most out of it that we can spiritually. President Ezra Taft Benson said, "There is no question that the health of the body affects the spirit, or the Lord would never have revealed the word of wisdom. God has never given any temporal commandments. That which affects our stature affects our soul." That which affects our stature affects our soul. That's pretty deep. That the health of our body affects our spirit. And that's where a huge part of this comes from that I care so much about. Every time I discuss the word of wisdom with someone who has looked at or studied nutrition or even considered a fad diet, they always bring up the science that goes against it. And here's the thing, God is the creator. He knows the microscopic details of our body that still baffle scientists. He gave us a manual, the word of wisdom, to make sure we know exactly how to take care of those bodies. It worked for Adam and Eve, and it will work for us. God warned us this would happen in the word of wisdom itself when he spoke of conspiring men in the last days. And you can find that in D&C 84:9, because my head is covering that. Let me explain what I mean by that, because this phrase, I don't think people even realize are in the word of wisdom, and it kind of blows people away. So, in the 1950s, while most of the world was in love with tobacco and its health properties, backed by science, doctors, and movie stars, most members of the church were not falling for it thanks to the word of wisdom. All of the claims turned out to be wrong, but it took much longer than it should have to get the warning on the side of the cigarette box. And that's because money talks. Money has a big influence on the science for the most part. And tobacco companies soon realized that as long as people were confused about whether or not smoking was healthy, they were still in control and people would still buy cigarettes. So they played the confusion game for as long as they could. Even though that was over half a century ago, it still matters to us now. Food companies have learned that confusion about whether or not something is healthy keeps people buying their products. People won't stop because food isn't worth giving up in their minds. And for the most part, money still decides the science. There are evil designs in the hearts of men, which is talked about in verse 4. And we need to be aware of what is right in this world of confusion about nutrition because it affects us not only temporally, but spiritually, as I just talked about. So this is a huge deal. So, okay, so let's go back to the Seventh-day Adventists for a minute. The healthiest people in America. What is it exactly that makes them so healthy? They follow the word of wisdom, believe it or not. Their health code was actually suggested to one of the founders. It was a suggestion of one of the founders of the religion. Her name was Ellen White. But they are very strict to follow it. And her words coincide almost perfectly with the things found in the word of wisdom, the do's, as I like to call them. We know the don'ts. We need to get better acquainted with the do's that are found in the word of wisdom. So what are the do's of the word of wisdom that we are forgetting to focus on? I'm going to show you, but I'm also going to point out one science-based reason, just one, to keep this quick, to follow what it says. There's a lot more, but I'm keeping this short. First of all, eat fruits and vegetables. You can find that in verse 11 and verse 16. It says verse 11 says, every herb in the season thereof and every fruit in the season thereof are to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. And verse 16 says, all grain is good for the food of man, and also the fruit of the vine, that which yieldeth fruit, whether in the ground or above the ground. These foods, fruits and vegetables, are packed full of nutrition. This is where we get most of our vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, and other phytochemicals. Fruits and vegetables have anti-inflammatory properties as well. So that is just a quick glimpse at why we should eat fruits and vegetables. The next one that the Word of Wisdom mentions is eat meat sparingly, only in times of winter, cold, or famine. And you can find that in verses 12 and 13. Or never use it at all in verses 13 and 15. It talks about that. So verse 12 says, yea, flesh also of beasts and of the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained for the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. Verse 13, and it is pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter or of cold or of famine. And verse 15, and these hath God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. Now here is one reason, backed by science, that we should probably follow the Word of Wisdom. The International Agency for Research on Cancer lists red and processed meat as a class 1 carcinogen. That's in the same category as tobacco smoke, formaldehyde, asbestos, and chicken is a class 2 carcinogen. Red meat and processed meat are more directly related to colorectal cancer and other cancers of the digestive tract. And chicken is more directly related to blood cancers like leukemia. Red meat is also known to increase the risk of heart disease, among other things. So there's that for you. Little known. So I get this question a lot from people who want to eat meat. And, right now there's this big fad for high protein. So, how much protein do we need? 0.8 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. Now that is ideal body weight. It's sufficient enough for even professional athletes. So if you happen to be overweight and you use this calculation, you're still getting too much protein. So based on ideal body weight, this is if you were nice and lean, men 19 plus need about 56 grams. Women 19 and over need about 46 grams. If you're pregnant or lactating as a woman, you need 63 to 75 grams. You can figure that out with the proper calculation. But really, no matter what companies or science says, this was set way back in the 1930s, and the standard has not changed. This is absolutely sufficient for anybody. All right, so the next do of the word of wisdom is to eat grain. It is the staff of life and good for our bodies, as it says in verses 14, 16, and 17. Verse 14 reads, all grain is ordained for the use of man and of beasts to be the staff of life. Verse 16, all grain is good for the food of man. Verse 17, nevertheless, wheat for man, as well also other grain. So there's 3 verses there. Why is it okay to eat grain? Well, grains are high in fiber, and in recent decades, we've learned about the science behind the gut microbiome and how it affects our health in multiple ways. What we are learning is that the good bacteria that resides in our gut directly feeds on fiber. And the more fiber that we put into our bodies, the more this good bacteria can grow. Grain happens to be packed with tons of fiber. So it is really, really good. And it's unfortunate that right now in society, it's kind of getting a bad rap. But really, for the most part, it's 3 steps, and it is that simple. And the blessings from following those simple rules are pretty incredible if you have not read them recently in the Word of Wisdom. So let's get on to that. So what are the blessings? This is just the last few verses. There are some interspersed that I didn't really include, but this is just the end of them. And all saints who remember to keep and do these things, walking in obedience to the commandments, shall receive health in their navel and marrow in their bones, and shall find wisdom and great treasures of knowledge, even hidden treasures, and shall run and not be weary, and shall walk and not faint. And I, the Lord, give unto them a promise, that the destroying angel shall pass by them, as the children of Israel, and not slay them. Amen. The blessings of the word of wisdom are so much greater than you can imagine. And I urge you to better follow the word of wisdom for your own health and your spirituality. God has never given us a revelation that was unimportant. We need to stop pretending the rest of the word of wisdom revelation was just God mumbling. He was quite clear. And we need to be clear as well on how we are taking care of our bodies so we can better serve him. When Christ comes again, I don't feel that he wants to come to a sick people who had the law of temporal salvation, the word of wisdom, but they chose not to fully follow it. He wants our spirits and bodies bright and healthy and at the ready to do his will. If you would like to learn more about the science behind the word of wisdom, including going a lot deeper into the word of wisdom, this was just the tip of the iceberg, including what the prophets across centuries have said, and how to get started on reversing your disease. Feel free to sign up for my course, Temporal Salvation, what you're missing from the word of wisdom, and how to end disease and weight struggles using God's law and wisdom. This course goes into much more depth than is possible to discuss in just one video. Now, if you want to get on board with changing how you're eating now to prevent and reverse disease so you can better serve the Lord. Feel free to sign up for my group lifestyle medicine course and coaching program. I limit the number I allow in this course so that everyone can get their needs met. So you may be put on a waiting list if you are not quick to act on that. If you happen to be pre-diabetic or have type 2 diabetes that you want to reverse, I highly suggest that we chat first, one-to-one, to see if my diabetes program might benefit you better. This is a bigger challenge for most diabetics to embrace the word of wisdom, and there's a lot more challenges that are more personal, a lot more education that needs to happen. So that's now, whether you sign up for one of my courses really doesn't matter to me. What does matter is that I felt very strongly that this is what the Lord wants me to teach the saints. Guys, Christ is coming again, and when he comes, he needs us to be ready, both spiritually and physically. I feel like the Lord needs an army that's not weighed down by ailments that can easily be eliminated through proper lifestyle changes. When the Savior comes again, I'm sure he wants to be met with people who take care of their spirit and their body to the best of their abilities. It's time for us, as his people, to take the word of wisdom a little more seriously so we can do his work to the best of our abilities, because the truth is, he is hastening his work. There is so much for us to do. And in all of it, our temporal salvation matters. Thank you so much for joining me today.